Jesus Christ, I call forth the light of the Father, Mother God. Let the power of the Holy One of God intensify in this hour. By the victory of the God flame, we call forth showers of light from mighty victory. Hosts of the Lord, descend now. Intensify thy cosmic honor flame within us. O beloved Father El Moria, beloved Father, our beloved Lanello. God the Father, the Son, the Holy Spirit, and the Divine Mother, come to us in this hour. Exalt thyself in us. Debase all that is less and lesser within us. Let the full fire of the resurrection flame swirl round about each one as we join with beloved Lanello in the celebration of his ascent to the heart of God. O thou magnificent Christhood of our beloved Mark, shine through us, shine through us, shine through us. Rings of mighty Estrella encircle us. Purge us this day. Prepare us and strengthen us in the ongoing crucifixion of the cross of white fire and the ruby ray. Lord Jesus Christ, seal in our hearts the mighty image of our leader, beloved Lanello. Seal it in our hearts that we might know his magnificent face each and every day. From the rising at dawn to the setting of the sun, let us know that face of purity and of love, of our beloved Father, of our beloved Mother. Place your electronic presence round about us now, beloved Lanello. We are your children, your brothers and your sisters. We are your mother. We are your heart. Let the glow of thy presence intensify in us in this hour. We claim thy mantle. We would wear it boldly in honor and in purity. Purge us again and again. Let us be tried again and again, purified and be made white. In thy footprints we place our feet. We would walk as you have walked down the centuries, sending violet flame into past, present, and future, clearing that pathway of light that all might follow thee to the heart of the great central sun. Beloved Helios, beloved Vesta, beloved Alpha and Omega, long is the way of darkness and despair. Quicken now the evolutions of this earth, and especially all who have come to this altar in recognition of the mighty flame of the resurrection, the Maxim light that blazes here. Let us not weary in well-doing, and let us not tarry in the doldrums of the astral plane and the psychic experiences, still not knowing the real from the unreal. Our Father, Mother God, bless us with the closeness and the pressing into our hearts of the love of Lanello and his wisdom. Let us take the shortcut that you have outlined to us. Let us take that shortcut and not step off the path into byways of self-indulgence. beloved Alpha and Omega, keep all who are the very ones, the children of Jesus Christ, and all ascended hosts. Keep them in thy care, and in the name of the 7 archangels, seal them in the magnanimous heart of Lanello. Amen. Good morning, everyone, and good afternoon. Let us sing to our beloved Lanello. Let us sing number 519. Let us claim the mantle of the Ascended Master Lanello. I claim the mantle of the Ascended Master Lanello. I claim the mantle of the Ascended Master Lanello. I claim the mantle of the Ascended Master Lanello.
Learn
Christmas carol, What Child Is This? Give your fiats to the child, Mark, born on Christmas Eve. Mark Prophet is a role model for our own joyous inner child. He never left that joy of his own childlike nature. Thank you. Please be seated. In the 12 years that I had the great good fortune to know beloved Mark as my husband and guru and dearest friend, as my mother and father, my child, and my twin flame, I realized that he was crucified many times over in that life, And as you go back to many past embodiments, you see that crucifixion again and again. You have all been crucified in this life, in past lives, to a greater or more severe extent or a lesser extent. We have survived that. Jesus came to give us the example of all things that we must pass through. And the final 3 initiations that bring us to union with God are the crucifixion, the resurrection, and the ascension. So I think on this day of the year, I reminisce on the 12 years that I have known him and all of the wonderful staff who have surrounded us, our children, and many that he had known before I met him. I think then of this day as beginning from Friday night till Monday morning of that weekend, being his final crucifixion, his resurrection, and his ascension. And so as we stop at those stations of life, we realize that the ultimate pain becomes the ultimate bliss, and becoming one with him and his causal body is no doubt the greatest blessing that any of us could have, besides having the sponsorship of El Moria and other Ascended Masters. It is the very closeness of Lanello that makes the ascension and the ascension process and our hope of becoming Ascended Masters a reality. It is seeing him in all of his earthliness, his spirituality, his tremendous genius, his profound perception of our souls, his knowing just where to take a stick and dig it into you at the side of your rib or somewhere else to get you to come off whatever state of consciousness, of human consciousness you might be in for the moment. It is a wonderful experience to know a true and living guru. And I believe that this is one of the greatest blessings of all time that I have had, and that you have shared in some way. Do not be concerned that you did not shake Lanello's physical hand. He has been shaking your hand ever since you came here, and you have placed your hand into the hand of an immortal. You have touched his heart through his teachings, through his tapes, through the many dictations he has delivered. There is no end to hearing his voice if you desire to hear that voice and feel the comfort and the compassion of his presence. And so today, before we receive the dictation, I would like to begin the spiral of Easter by giving our Easter resurrection rituals. These take about 45 minutes. We have a very good tape. And what I want us to do in the process of spiraling upward with his mantle as he draws us up unto himself in this today's experience is the resurrection flame pouring through us. The sensation that because he has risen, we can rise with him. You know how many times he held up a handkerchief and pointed that the person at the top of the handkerchief was the one that was at the highest level of initiation, and as that one would rise, then all would rise with him. Let us feel his mantle as that handkerchief today, that as we give the resurrection decrees, we might truly enter into the flame of his immortality and perhaps capture the essence of that flame and seal it in our hearts for the day when we too shall take our leave and our victory.
This time we will have our testimonies to our beloved Lanello.
My name is Helen Ries. I live in South Glastonbury. I'm a member of the staff. I serve in the kitchen. And I have been a student of the Ascended Masters for 27 years. In this embodiment, I have had a very burning desire in my heart to serve Jesus. I have searched for Jesus, and I've been to many organizations trying to find the right place. And one time, a lady spoke to me. She had been a very devout member of the I Am movement, and she was now a member of the Summit Lighthouse. She talked to me about the Summit Lighthouse and the privileges that one would have to have the presence of this teaching. And so one day she said, "Would you like to read one of my I Am books?" And I said, "Oh, yes, I'd like that very much." So I had only read a few pages in the book when I knew immediately, this is what I've been searching for. And my dear friend, Edith Emmert, was with me. And so I said, "Oh, Edith, this is what I've been searching for all my life. Now we must go to the Summit Lighthouse. We must go to a conference there." So we attended our first conference at La Tourelle in October 1968. At that time, the church had purchased their property in Santa Barbara, and it was to be a focus of light between Los Angeles and San Francisco in order to hold back earthquakes and any kind of calamity that might appear in that area. Edith Emmert and I decided that we would move to Santa Barbara. And this focus was being prepared at the time, and it was called the Mother House, and it was being prepared for conferences and Summit University classes. About this time, I had given Mark a check, and he put it in his pocket, and for several months it didn't come back. And I was concerned. I thought maybe he has forgotten it or placed it somewhere that he didn't remember it. So I was thinking, how can I get word to Lanello or to Mark that I would like to have him cash this check? And my Holy Christ self spoke to me and said, "You speak to Mark's Holy Christ self and tell him that there is a check in his pocket, in the pocket of his coat, and he must get that check and cash it as soon as possible." Well, in about a week's time after that, the check came back. And so I had my prayer was heard. Mother, I was going to give a eulogy to Lanello, but Mother gave the perfect eulogy, and I would just add a couple of comments. I had one personal experience with Mark, and I had a number of experiences in groups where he talked to us at intermission time or at meal time, and he was always so gracious and loving to all of us. He never put himself a notch or two ahead of us to make us feel that he was superior. He had such great humility, and after he had ascended, I fully realized that I had not really appreciated what he really was. I was feeling a little bit distressed about that. And then, sometime along the way, Mother gave a lecture in which she said that we may choose an Ascended Master for our father and an Ascended Master, Lady Master for our mother. So I chose Jesus for my father and Mother Mary for my mother. Then, a few weeks later, she said, "You may choose a second father if you wish, and a second mother." So my second father is Lanello, and my second mother is the goddess of liberty. And Lanello has been very close to me and Jesus. They have helped me in all of my problems and adventures and things that I needed. My dear beloved Edith at this time had been united with her Holy Christ self. She communed with several of the Ascended Masters, and one of them was Lanello. So the summer after Mark's Ascension, the Summit Lighthouse, the summer conference was going to be at the land of Lanello. It was about 30 miles in the country from Santa Barbara, from Colorado Springs. So we wanted to go to this conference, and Edith sent a message to Lanello, should we go in our car or fly? We really wanted to go in our car. And Lanello sent back a beautiful message, go in your car, you will have no problems, and you will get there and get home again safely. So the morning we left home, we stopped in a small town for breakfast. It was a typical Western town. The people were speaking in loud voices, and the radio was playing rock music at a very loud rate. And all of a sudden, there was a lull came over the room. Everybody stopped talking, the radio stopped, and everything was silent. And then, over the radio, came green sleeves. Green sleeves. Oh, I said to Edith, listen, green sleeves. That is Lanello telling us we don't need to fear anything. He will be with us all the way to the conference and home again. When we arrived home, we knew that we needed to have another car. So we went to the Ford Motor Company in Santa Barbara, and we would like to have a yellow Ford. Well, they didn't have a yellow Ford. So it would be quite some time before they would get one. So we decided we'd take another blue car. Well, the morning when we came to get the blue car, when we drove down the driveway, I said to Edith, oh, look, there's a yellow Ford up there by the door. So we got our yellow Ford. Then one Sunday, Mark, in Santa Barbara, Mark gave a dictation, and he said that he would sometimes come as a bird. So, lo and behold, a few days later, a blue jay came in the door from the garden. That was a beautiful garden. He walked down the hall, and it was quite a long hall for a bird to walk down. And he hopped up the 2 steps onto the platform, turned around, and gave us a small lecture. I didn't know this was going to make you laugh. But anyway, he gave us a small lecture and walked out. And he came to visit us several times during that summer. At this time, Edith was having problems. She was not able to get up and down the stairs in the apartment building where we lived, and so I had to look for a place on the ground floor, and it was difficult. I couldn't find any places. So one morning I was coming down the street, down Main Street, and I met our neighbors, and they said to me, come into the cafe with me and let's have a cup of coffee together. So I said, yes, I would. So he wanted to know why I was downtown so early. I said, well, I'm looking for a place for Edith. We have to have a place on the ground floor. So he said, I just came from the Sherwood. the manager of the Sherwood was a very good friend of his. He says, "Go there right away. They have a vacant apartment there, and maybe you can get it." So I hurried to the Sherwood, and the manager was very kind to me and said yes, he had a vacant apartment, and it would be just fine for Edith. It was on the top floor, but they had an elevator, so there was no problem there. But we had quite a surprise when we moved there, because right next door to us lived a lady that we had known before. I was so upset about it, or wondering about it. I knew that didn't just happen. That was something that was meant to be. This lady needed to live beside us because we had a karma that we had to work out together. But that never materialized. We didn't fulfill that. Then Edith became ill, and it was necessary for me to take her to a convalescent home. And there was a very nice convalescent home in Livingston, so I made a call there. Would they have a vacancy? Would it be possible for Edith to come there? Well, they didn't have a vacancy at that moment, but they would have one very soon, and they would let me know. So a few mornings after that, when I went down to my car to go to work, it was a cold winter day, and there was snow on the ground. When I got in my car, I looked up, and on the fence across the alley was a white bird. Oh my, a white bird this time of the year, wintertime, snow on the ground? It must be a pigeon. I couldn't believe it. Then a few minutes it dawned on me, oh, Mark said that he would come as a bird. Here he was. He was on the fence looking at me. He was there every morning for a number of days, and he had come to tell me that all would be well with Edith. So that the following summer, the lady that lived across the alley was in her yard. She had many birds that came there constantly to be fed. And she came to the fence, and we visited for a little while, and she said, did you see that bird that was here last winter? And I said, yes, I saw the bird. And she said, do you know, he came on the first day of November, and he left on the 11th, and that was the day my husband passed away. So I figured Mark had two missions there. He had one for Edith and one for the lady's husband. And then, let's see, after that, I had an opportunity to move to Glastonbury. I had never dreamed I'd ever get to Glastonbury. I didn't have enough money to support me there. But I arrived in Glastonbury, so then my Ford wasn't sufficient. I had to have a car with a two-wheel drive, so I needed another car. So I called to Lanello to help me, and I went to the Whiting garage in Livingston, and I needed a car. So he showed me a very beautiful car, a Geoprism, a 1990 model. It had 5,000 miles on it, and all the warranties, everything that you could ask for. It had been a Hertz car. I would like to have had that car, but it was beyond my means to get it. So I looked at all their other cars, and they didn't suit me. So I went to Bozeman, and I went to every car lot that I could find, but there was nothing there. So I came back. I said, I guess I'll go back to the Whiting place once more. So I went back, and I asked if they could possibly give me a reduction in the price of the car. I would very much like to have that car. So after a little time of figuring, the man said, well, he'd give me the car for such and such a sum of money. And I said, well, I can meet that. I'll take the car at that price. I had to borrow $2,000 from a friend, but I knew I could pay it back right away, and I did not want to finance my car and have to pay a interest fee. So I still have that car, and I drive it to work every day, and it's a real pleasure to me. Mother, I wish to thank you, beloved Mother, beloved Nello, beloved Jesus. My heart overflows with love and gratitude for you. You have given me so many blessings, privileges, gifts, and the privilege of being a member of your staff. And I thank God, the Masters, the angels, and all who brought me to this teaching. I have the privilege of being in the presence of the Holy Family and the light bearers. And every day when I come here, I thank God for the privilege of walking on holy ground.
Good evening, Mother and Reverend Booth. Good evening, everybody. My name is Mattiann Vigil, and I'm a member of staff here. I've been here approximately 5 months, and I work in the editorial word processing department. And I've been a student of the Ascended Masters for approximately 7 years now. And I really didn't think that I was going to be able to be here and give my story, because when it was spoken of that 1995 has rained on all of us, I have really been drenched. So I am just really gratified to stand here and give my testimony of my acquaintance with Lanello. It is with such fullness of joy and love of my heart that I could honor Lanello and give this testimony to his magnanimous heart, to our beloved ever-present Guru. No, I didn't actually meet Lanello as Mark in this embodiment, but I do know Lanello. And I know that Lanello knows each person, every keeper of the flame, and all the light bearers, and especially his staff here at the ranch. To give you a little bit of continuity to my story, I'd like to begin just a little bit at the beginning. And as I said, I didn't think I was going to be able to give this story, so originally I had written it up as an I am the witness, and I was going to give it to Mother, so it's a little bit lengthy. But this continuity will show you how that love tie, how the threads of contact were woven between Lanello and myself and the Masters. And I think it's very important to realize this love tie, this day-to-day, heart-to-heart contact that we can have with them. My real spiritual path began on the momentous day of May 15th, 1988, when I first attended a conference of the Ascended Masters at a Whole Life Expo in Pasadena, California. And I have never been the same since. It was such a significant turning point in my life. So, in May 1988, I'd never heard a dictation, but I was pretty curious. I'd never heard or known what a decree was, but I did experience them that night. And at the end of the evening, as the grand plan would have it, I had the privilege of meeting Mother. And I knew that I just had to speak to her. My soul was crying out for nourishment. And what I was seeking was that oneness that I had known in deep meditation And this is what I came in my heart to ask Mother about, although I didn't know it at the time. I just didn't know what words were going to come. So Mother's directives were very, very clear and forthright. She said, take your 2 weeks vacation and go to the July summer conference. And I thought to myself, how does she know I have 2 weeks vacation? So I told Mother, I said, the summer conference sounds like a camping experience, and I've never done anything like this before. I don't even have any camping equipment. But I think most of you know Mother. She didn't leave any loopholes. She said, dorm tents and facilities are provided. And so I myself have learned since then to just be there and let the masters and the angels pick up the cue from that point onward. So I found myself at the summer conference, the July conference, and the first night there, I had to stay down at Eastgate because I had arrived too late. And everybody seemed to be very experienced campers except myself, even the children. They knew what they were doing. I didn't. So everything was so undoubtedly new to me. The tall grass, the tents, outdoor toilets. We all know that. Flashlight at nighttime. It was all so new. So that night I found myself finally settled into my sleeping bag. And just as I was about to settle down, I heard something move through the tall grass. And it moved down the aisle of the sleeping people there, but it didn't exit out the other end. And so I was a little puzzled over this. And the next morning I asked other people in the tent if they had heard anything, and they said no, they hadn't heard a thing. So the next day, when I went up to the heart, I didn't forget this particular experience. And I rented a cot that was well raised off the ground. I didn't want anything like that to happen again because I thought it was some critter probably moving through the grass. And so after a very, very full day of very profound teachings, there I was again in this tent, settled on the cot in my sleeping bag. And just as I was about to doze off, I heard the tent flap open and somebody walked in. And they brushed right by my sleeping bag and just very briskly brushed that sleeping bag. And I pulled my feet up and I peered over the edge of my sleeping bag and couldn't see a thing because it was pitch black. And so I was just straining, all of my senses were straining to see where this person, whatever was going to, where they were going to settle in. And I couldn't figure out, and nothing ever really happened. It didn't sound like they actually went into a sleeping bag, but I knew that they hadn't exited out the other end of the tent. So anyway, these were just things that I tucked away in the back of my mind, and I was very happy to get back to sunny Southern California. And so several months later, I was already attending study groups and weekly services. And at one evening service, we began doing the decree 10.20. Here and now, I am the victorious one. And just to give you a little background of this next incident, I'd like to simply say that I grew up in a very Catholic family, went to a very proper Catholic school, you know, when white gloves and hats and the whole bit were in. And so we spent many devotional hours on our knees. And so all of us Catholic school children, to survive these types of situations of so many do's, don'ts, and shouldn'ts, we developed quite a sense of humor, and especially one that was triggered in a religious environment. So as we were giving Decree 10.20, I was pretty amused by this. Some of the passages were lifting right up off my tippy toes, and it was so different from my Catholic upbringing. Open those doors and see them run. Open the doors and let them out. And to my amazement, the doors were actually opened up to let them out. So it was pretty difficult for me to contain myself. Let out those discarnates and entities and demons. Stand up now and shake them out. Shake them out. And we did. And of course I did with a great deal of levity. So I was really curious about this. Who wrote this decree? And so I turned to the front of the decree, and I realized that it was Lanello who had written this. And so I stopped to think, I wonder if there is any correlation between what has occurred back up in the Montana mountains and what's going on with this decree. And so I just kind of thought about that and left it there for a while too. And I just thought that just possibly there was some correlation. So that following February 1989, when the celebration of Lanello's Ascension Day service was announced at the Los Angeles Teaching Center, I was really looking forward to it, to know more about Lanello. And so Sunday morning, I was seated in an aisle seat, and the meditation music was playing, and I was in deep meditation. And suddenly, somebody came up beside me and touched me on my upper arm. I turned my head, opened my eyes, expecting to see an usher with a message for me. But no one was there. But I knew someone had touched me because the touch of the hand was still vibrating on my arm. And then I realized that it was Lanello. No doubt in my mind that he had just walked up the aisle to the altar. And then I also realized who it was back in the tent. Lanello was having quite a bit of fun with me, humoring me, and not allowing me to get too serious on the path, and also allowing me to become acquainted with him. And I realized, too, that he knew me well enough to know just how to approach me. But months later, the touch of his hand was still on my arm. Early February 1990, Lanello enters the scene again. I was living in Livingston at the time, and we received word that on the 25th, Lanello was going to give a dictation for the occasion of his Ascension Day service celebration. So I had agreed to give several people a ride, but we didn't arrive early enough to be seated in the court, and so we had to sit in the overflow area. And my concentration on Lanello was very greatly challenged. So as the dictation began, I was trying to focus on Lanello and picture what he might look like in his Ascended Master body. And to my knowledge, there weren't any pictures of Lanello after his ascension, so I was really guessing. But pictures of other Ascended Masters just kind of floated through my mind, and I could kind of picture loose robes and kind of belted in some manner, and sandals. And so I thought to myself, he's probably in white, just as Jesus is in white, and I'm sure he's wearing sandals. No sooner had this thought gone out when the next words I heard him speak were, "I come, beloved, and I represent a high order of saints in heaven, as I am robed in a robe of delicate off-white wool, and I wear a metallic gold belt with sandals." This personal message, interjected right in the middle of a very important dictation, was so moving to me because I realized that we're only a thought away from Lanello. So from that moment on, the cord to his magnanimous heart really became stronger, and he just became nearer and dearer to my heart. But I also know that it's not just to me alone that his magnanimous heart reaches out to. This past December 24th, on his birthday, he sent the loving message, "Now then, I would not leave the chelas who have stood stalwart. I would not leave any of you who would stray a sheep from the path. I would go after the lost sheep rather than stay with the 99. Yes, beloved, I would go after you, for you are my own. You have loved me, and I have called you out from among many who are not worthy." And as I was preparing for this testimony today, it was really pretty clear to me that I'm not just standing up here giving this testimony of Lanello. Lanello is really saying, hey, look what I can do for you. These are just tidbits of what really is in store. So I know he does speak very, very personally to each of us and bids us enter his fold, no matter who we are, wherever we are, if we will give him the opportunity, because he really is waiting for us to get to know him. At the 1993 Easter Conference, we were asked to focus on the expansion of the heart chakra by giving St. Germain's heart meditation. And the Masters having done so much for me, I determined to go back to my teaching center and coordinate a Monday night service for this purpose. As part of the focus, I also centered on the bonding of the 5 precious hearts of the Immaculate Heart of Mary, the Sacred Heart of Jesus, the Diamond Heart of El Moria, the Purple Fiery Heart of St. Germain, and the Magnanimous Heart of Lanello. And out of deep love for these blessed hearts and the bonding that I could feel occurring, I would say and meditate on some prayer affirmations to each one as I would fall asleep that night and as I would awaken the next morning. And they were, in the Immaculate Heart of Mary, I trust. Jesus, meek and humble of heart, make my heart like unto thine. O presence of the diamond heart, be mine, I am thine. My heart is a center of violet fire. My heart is the purity St. Germain desires. I live, move, and have my being in the magnanimous heart of Lanello. So one night, as I was meditating on these 5 precious hearts, I realized it was very easy to visualize all of the hearts except Lanello's. I just couldn't imagine what a magnanimous heart could possibly look like. And immediately, Lanello answered in a very, very blessed way. As I lay on my bed, I became enfolded in the living, loving presence of Lanello's heart. It reached well beyond the extent of my arms, far above the top of my head, and well below my feet. It completely surrounded and permeated my being. I was enraptured in the oneness of Lanello's presence. My whole being pulsated, one with the loving, rhythmic heartbeat of Lanello. His magnanimous heart was truly a reality, alive in a very, very soft, pure pink. And the words that just kept flowing through me as I was enraptured in his presence were, I and my Father are one. I and my Father are one. I and my Father are one. Because not only was I one with our Father, Mother God, but also one with Lanello as our Father. The word magnanimous pretty closely describes the heart of this beloved, ever-present guru. Magnus means great, and animus means spirit. He who represents the spirit of the Great White Brotherhood. Lanello's magnanimous heart to me is indicative of but one master's invitation into the total reality of divine love and oneness, which awaits us through the teachings of the Ascended Masters. I feel truly blessed to be part of Mark's and Mother's staff here at the ranch, and to be part of the team who work on Mark Prophet's teachings and lectures. And to me, this is no small coincidence. There's no greater place on earth or any other place I would choose to be than right here in the heart of the Masters and under their mantle. And I know I'm under the direct tutelage of Lanello. Not a day goes by that I don't receive some instruction from him, very specific teachings and answers tailored for my precise situation or issue. Lanello and the Masters know precisely what it takes for the refining process for me and for each one of their chelas. And I'm just so grateful for their profound love. For quite a long time now, I've desired to give testimony of the many blessings that I have reaped since I have come into the teachings. And I think it's very, very fitting that my first testimony is of Lanello, because I think it really does start with him. So I'm just very, very gratified to let my voice, my heart, ring throughout the universe of this love and testimony for Lanello. Thank you.
My name is Grace Johnson. I live at the North Ranch, and I serve the staff at the Montessori International School there. I would like to tell you of two instances where I very thoughtlessly failed to accept an opportunity to be in the presence of Mark Prophet. The first instance was my failure to accept the invitation to attend the First Summit University session with Mark Prophet. Instead of making the calls and trusting in faith, I became entangled with the mundane logistics. The second lost opportunity occurred as Mark and Mother, along with those of us who accompanied them and their children on the pilgrimage to the Holy Land in 1972. We were preparing to return to Paris for our flight back to the United States when Mark suggested that I might talk to our people to see if they would be willing to spend the night in the airport in Paris and then accompany him on a tour of Versailles the following day. Many of you are aware of the fact that one of Mark Prophet's embodiments was that of the great Sun King Louis XIV of France, and the architect of Versailles. Once again, instead of making the calls and using my ability to convince the group that we simply could not miss this opportunity to see this magnificent golden city, I accepted such weak excuses as a shortage of funds and weariness. After Mark ascended, I had to come to grips with the fact that I had failed two important initiations testing my faith. Then and there I began to pray that I would not make the same mistake with Mother. Now I am so grateful for the many opportunities that I have not lost in these 27 years as a student of the Ascended Masters and their messengers, for the wonderful experiences I have enjoyed with Mother and Mark, and the great gifts of truth I have received and which I strive to embody. One more thing I would like to tell you. For several days after I received the announcement of Mark's ascension, I was in a state of questioning meditation. I was not yet aware of the relationship between our mission and the Book of Revelation. One morning after I had concluded my prayer and decree rituals, I sat for a time in my prayer room. I had made fervent calls for Mother, the children, their staff, as well as all of us, for a holding power and a healing through this period of transition which we were feeling so deeply. My mind was open and in a state of rest. Suddenly I felt the presence of Lanello. I found my thoughts returning to the Holy Land. I was thinking of so many things I had not understood regarding our journey. As I sat there, I began to see clearly the meaning of our total experience, and much more was to come later on later dates following my morning rituals. I don't know how long I sat there that first morning, but I was never the same person after that day. I saw the vision of our mission, and its victory was stamped upon my soul. I became joyous beyond description, and I knew that I had to write a letter to Mother. Lanello said, "Tell them," and that's what I've been doing to this day. Thank you.
Hi, Mother. Hi. I had an experience with Lanello myself. and didn't realize it until tonight. When I came here about 8 months ago now, I couldn't find a job. I was looking. I was going to all different interviews, getting applications. It was an experience. I couldn't find anything. No matter how I tried, I couldn't get a job. I started to go to the park a lot and do decrees up on the stage in the little theater. And little did I know, but then again I guess I did, that someone was listening to me. And I happened to have done Lanello's decree where he roars. Well, I made the tiniest little roar you ever want to hear. But he heard it all the way across the field. And this was Barry Lamb. And he called me over after I got off the stage and was walking away towards home, and asked me if I'd like to have a job with SBI. And that's how I got the job with SBI. So I'm glad to be there. And thank you very much. And thank Lanello for being there for me. And thank you.
Good evening, Mother. Good evening, everyone. My name is William Lynn, and I'm a staff member here at the Royal Teton Ranch. I work at the front gate, and I drive the Big Spur school bus. I first came across the teachings of the Ascended Masters while living in Hawaii in 1971. I had been searching for a spiritual path and a teacher for 2 years. And I was living in a place called God's Free Universe on the big island of Hawaii. Someone there handed me a pearl of wisdom from the Summit Lighthouse. I could feel the light of the Masters as I read the words. So I wrote to headquarters in Colorado Springs for more information. A few weeks later, I received in the mail an invitation to attend the fall conference, the class of Cosmic Fortune, with dictations from several Ascended Masters. After the conference, I had an interview with Mark Prophet. I told him I wanted to join the staff and serve at headquarters. He could see that I was not ready for joining staff at that time. And he instructed me to find a job and a place to live near headquarters and attend services there on Wednesday, Friday, Saturday, and Sundays. Which I did. I found a job at the Broadmoor Hotel as a ski instructor. The Broadmoor Hotel was located right next to La Tourelle, and the place where I ended up living was 2 blocks away. So I attended many of Mark's Sunday night sermons and lectures and several conferences and meetings that were held there. After a probationary period of about 4 months, Mark came by one day and picked me up in his car, and we drove to a place called the Four Winds Organic Center. It was located in downtown Colorado Springs. It was still under construction, and it was due to open on May 1st, St. Germain's Ascension Day. He asked me if I wanted to work there, and I said yes. The Four Winds was a restaurant, a bookstore, a health food juice bar, and in the back there was a bakery where we made organic baked goods, pies, bread, and things like that. And Mark was very proud of the Four Winds, and he knew that the results of pesticides and herbicides in the food were not good for people on the spiritual path. So he was determined to set forth good, wholesome food, organically grown. And he even had a lot of the vegetables and carrots that we used for our carrot juice shipped in from California. We even had organically grown Kona coffee from Hawaii. And he loved the blueberry pie. His favorite was blueberry pie and ice cream, I gotta tell you. He loved it. He used to like to make the feel the customers welcome when they came in. He'd greet them at the door. Sometimes he'd sit with them at the counter at the juice bar and talk to them, ask them about themselves. He used to like to make the feel the customers welcome when they came in. He'd greet them at the door. Sometimes he'd sit with them at the counter at the juice bar and talk to them, ask them about themselves, and spend a lot of time with the staff there as well. Some of the stories that he used to tell to the staff and to the customers were very funny. He always knew where a person was at in their state of consciousness and their level of development, and he was able to lead them to the next step on the path through his conversation. He loved people and was always interested in what they had to say. The Four Winds became a very popular place for people to gather in Colorado Springs and definitely reflected the magnanimous heart of Mark Prophet. There was always beautiful classical music playing. Mozart, Beethoven, Vivaldi. Mark especially liked Vivaldi's Four Seasons and Pachelbel's Canon in D. In the middle of the store, we had a reading room where customers could go to browse through the teachings of the Ascended Masters and find out how to sign up for the Pearls of Wisdom and the Keepers of the Flame fraternity. I believe that many people first contacted the Summit Lighthouse through our reading room there. Sometimes after work, Mark would take some of the staff to the European Health Spa in Colorado Springs. He was a strong believer in physical fitness. He even learned how to swim there at age 55, which was quite an accomplishment. Our staff meetings are the main form of communication between Mark and the staff. They were held almost every week and were a source of enlightenment, wisdom, inspiration, humor, teaching, and discipline. Daily events were discussed, and decisions were made on everything, how to do things. Everyone had a chance to have their say. Mark would always listen to the staff and try to get the best information about any given situation before he made a final decision on anything. In the chapel where we had our meetings and our services, everyone had an assigned seat. That way, Mark could look up and see who was absent and who was present. He knew exactly where everyone was supposed to be. One day he looked up and said, "Where is Bill Lynn?" He roared. Someone said I was sick in bed in the top floor of La Tourelle. He said, "Well, I want the audio department to run a wire up to the top floor and install a speaker by Bill Lynn's bunk bed so he can hear everything." And I did. The Master said, "Except you become like a little child, you cannot enter in." Mark had that childlike state of consciousness, which you observe in children, which is why he was so much fun to be around. Spontaneous and very funny. He could always find something funny in just about anything that happened. For example, we had a rule there where staff were not allowed to hitchhike. Well, one day a staff member missed his ride to the Four Winds, which is in downtown Colorado Springs, and so he went and hitchhiked a ride to get to work. Just as he was getting out of the car, the driver turned around and punched him in the nose. That staff member's still here on staff, too. Now, the teaching that Mark gave us was that this was instant karma for being disobedient to the rules of the messenger. And this was one of the ways that he could teach us in day-to-day, everyday events. Now, Mark had the 9 gifts of the Holy Spirit, which he had since he was a teenager, in all of the cities, which are powers, the higher powers of the Eastern Masters. Like a true master, he kept these powers hidden and never displayed them publicly. They were only used as the need arose. I recall our trip to Hawaii in June of 1972. Climb the Highest Mountain had just been published, and beloved El Morya had given the messengers a 2-week vacation in Hawaii. Being from Hawaii, the messengers took me along so I could guide them around the islands. On Maui, we drove up to the top of Haleakala volcano, over 10,000 feet above sea level, about the same height as Electric Peak. We took in the view from the summit. From there one can see all the islands except Kauai, which is over the horizon. We were far above the clouds. On the way down, the road was engulfed by the clouds, and we couldn't see the road ahead. There was a danger that we might drive off the road. So Mark, who was driving, put his hand out in front of him, right above the dashboard, and chanted one of the Bija mantras to the elementals. And like the parting of the Red Sea, the clouds parted, and the road became visible. The clouds stayed on both sides of the road as we descended the mountain to safety. Although this is a testimonial to Mark Prophet, I would like to pay tribute to Mother as well. It was on this trip 22 years ago in St. Joseph's Church in Hilo, Hawaii, that beloved El Morya assigned Mother to walk the 14 stations of the cross. I remember sitting in the back of the church and watching as Mother began her meditation at the first station and went around the church, stopping at each of the 14 stations. I'm grateful that I got to go on that trip and get to know Mark in a personal way. I am also most grateful to have known Mark Prophet during the last years of his final incarnation. Hero Universe, I am grateful. To those of you here and in the field, I would like to encourage you to follow in his footsteps. Read his books. Listen to his lectures and sermons. Hear the hundreds of dictations of the Ascended Masters given through him in the Only Mark albums. See his life story in a dictation by Saint Germain on the Mark's movie video. Come and attend Summit University this summer with Lanello and the Blu-ray Masters. Apply to serve on staff here at headquarters or at our teaching centers. And support our satellite ministry and help get the teachings of the Ascended Masters on satellite TV worldwide to all the English-speaking countries of the world. The night before his passing on, Mark told Mother that she should find a place in Montana where the community should be established and where headquarters could be relocated. And here we all are at Maitreya's Mystery School, the Royal Teton Ranch, Glastonbury, and the local community. Praise the Lord, and thank you, Lanello.
Good evening, friends. You are all my friends, just as Mark was all of our friends. My name is Laverne Wilson. I was born in Snowflake, Arizona, for Mr. Flake and Mr. Snow, who had founded the town. It was an old Mormon missionary home, a settlement. And I was born into this strong this strong Mormon family named Smith, and we were relatives of Joseph Smith, who had founded the church. And you know, it's quite something to be able to escape from that sort of thing, because your life is totally grounded in that tradition. Well, something was evidently working with me through my life anyway, because it doesn't matter where you are, or where you're born, or what's going on with you, because if you're destined to be a freedom fighter or freedom lover, you're going to find it no matter where you are. So when I graduated from high school at 17, I was assigned to give a speech. And I was very elated, and I couldn't figure out why I was assigned to give this speech, because I wasn't one of the higher scholastic ones in the class. But I was a descendant of Jesse and Smith, so I figured that's why I was given. Nevertheless, the topic of my speech, I thought, this is the most important time of my life. I must give what's important in life. And so what is important in life? Well, the only thing that I could come up with was freedom. The name of my speech was, "Oh, would you not like to be free? Seek the truth, and the truth will set you free." My message was that I knew that mankind was not free. Now, they might think they're free, but I knew in my soul that my soul was in bondage. And what my mission was at that time was to go search the world and find out where is freedom and how to find that freedom in Christ. I didn't really understand that, but anyway, that was the concept that I was talking about. Well, nobody quite dug what I was talking about, but nevertheless, I really had a wonderful time when I gave that speech, because I roared it, because I knew nobody was really in tune with where I was at. I was, a little bit different or something. My story begins finding the Summer Lighthouse in February 15th, 1972. I was in an office working in Santa Barbara for the Center of Democratic Institutions. A lady came in one morning with a little half-inch advertisement she had cut out of the paper the night before. She said, "Laverne, you're always going to everything. Why don't you take this and try it out?" I said, "Well, I've seen the Summer Lighthouse in the phone directory, and I thought someday I'll check it out, but I don't think I'll go tonight." But another lady in the office said, "Well, hey, you don't live very far from there. Why don't we just go check it out? I'll come by and pick you up." I said, "Okay." So we go there and check out what is going on. First thing, we get to the door and we hear this chanting, and I thought, oh my goodness, what did we get into? But before we could go to the service, we had to go listen to a 15-minute tape from Mother. And as she said, I was always going to everything. From the time I had left the Mormon church in 1950, I had studied moral rearmament, self-realization, Scientology, unity, Christian Science, religious science, divine science, science of mind. I had joined the Prosperos, the Unitarian, and the Rosicrucian and Theosophical Society, and everything I could get my hands on. But, so I really thought that I knew everything. Well, I had my mountain of knowing everything is reduced to about a little tiny thimble by now, but nevertheless, the last thing that I was in in January, just before this February in 1972, I had gone to listen to a flower lady. She gave nice sermons, and it was a little quaint church in Santa Barbara. And one day she was reading flowers, and she said, "Everybody bring a bouquet of flowers that nobody else has touched but you." When she read my flowers, she said, "Something's going to happen in your life. It's going to change your entire life. And it's going to be a most amazing thing that's ever happened to you." Well, I couldn't figure out, what could possibly be, because my life had been very drudgerous. Anyway, so this night, February 15th, listening to this 15-minute tape from Mother, I wasn't too surprised at most everything that was said except one thing. One statement grabbed my soul, and I have never been the same since. And that statement was, "The goal of life is the ascension." Well, in all of my studies and religious training, I had never thought about the ascension. And I realized Jesus said to follow me, and that was part of the thing. But I thought, everything that I had been in, I had become very strongly questioning. I'm a very strong questioner, and that's part of my problem now. I have to have everything my way and question everything that happens. But I thought, man, if there's anything to this story about the ascension, I've got to check this thing out. Because I know there's no other way out. The ascension is the only way out of this planet, or out of this earth, or this embodiment. Because I had already understood, and I recognized from having a near-death experience, that you don't die when you die, and you come back when you... And anyway, so I knew there was no way out except the ascension. That would be the only possibility. So, man, I'm going to find out for sure if this thing is really real or not. I went to every decree session, every lecture, and every conference. That was February 72. So I had 4 conferences where Mark and Mother were there. But because of my pride and my strong sense of knowingness, I really wasn't ever sure about Mark. Because I'd been through everything, and I thought, I've got to be sure about this. I can't just go into it blindly. I have to really. But of course there would be moments and dictations, and I would just know that it had to be true. But then I get this questioning going on over here, total questioning. Then on February 17th, 1973, it was the day before Mark came was giving his last lecture in Santa Barbara. And I knew he was coming, so he would definitely have to sing "How Great Thou Art." How great thou art. And I had been playing for the Sunday school there. I wasn't a good pianist, but I had to go up Saturday afternoons to practice so that I could be sure and play "How Great Thou Art" and any other songs that were necessary to play. As I rushed in to start to practice, coming into the Mother house, Mark was standing over, looking out the windows with his back turned. But I was so excited to see him. Before I realized it, I had said, "Hi, Mark," and I started over toward him. But at that moment, I discovered that Mark was in deep meditation. And when he slowly, slowly turned around to greet me, I had wished I had never interrupted what was going on, because I could see from his expression that he was in deep meditation. And I wouldn't have known. Later, of course, I realized that he was likely visualizing what's going to happen this next week, because that was the 17th, and he gave his lecture on Sunday. Monday, he went home, and Tuesday, I think, was when he went into a coma, and then, the rest of the story. But I was so amazed at this moment, because he had such a countenance with him that I knew he was with the masters. And he had his hands back behind him like this, and very, very, very slowly he brought his hand forward, and I knew he didn't really want to shake hands, but here I am standing there, so he took my hand, and a very chilling electric shock went through me. Now that I thought about it later, I thought perhaps he must have been in the Ascension coils even at that time, because I was stunned. I couldn't understand it at that time. Then on February 26, 1973, the most exciting moment of my life occurred. I had been in the decree sessions all that week. We were doing 24-hour vigils for Mark. Monday morning, the leader came out and announced, Mark Prophet has made his ascension. When I realized that this statement had really resounded in me, I have never been so thrilled and so happy in my whole life. Because for one time in my whole life in this embodiment, I knew that something was really real. And these teachings were real, and that Mark had ascended. I had had a dream about him the night before, and I can't tell you the thrill and the excitement that went through my entire being, for I knew that this was really so. Mark has helped me much more since he has ascended than before, because before he had ascended, I couldn't really trust. My human questioning wouldn't allow me to trust. But after that, he's helped me in many, many ways. And I cannot thank Mark and Lanello enough. And Mother, thank you very much.
Thank you, Reverend.
My name is Rose Gadigian. I'm on staff at the Royal Teton Ranch, and I work in mail processing. I've been studying the teachings of the Ascended Masters for about 17 years. Beloved Mother, friends of Lanello, good evening. I don't exactly know when my friendship with Lanello began, but I always know that he's been with me whenever I needed him. As a child, I cherished the song Green Sleeves, and I used to sing it a lot. When my mother passed on, and I was at the funeral home with my family, Green Sleeves came through the speakers, and it's just what I needed, and my family did too. There was a time when I was a single mother, and I was feeling all alone, and I was feeling friendless, and I called to Lanello, please send me a friend. And he sent me a friend, and he sent one for my son also. He was there when I needed him. But my friendship with Lanello really began when he put me in sales. He was my trainer. He always has been my trainer, and he's still training me. So I'd like to tell you 3 short stories, sales stories. The first one occurred just recently. In addition to working on staff, occasionally I sell nature art. And I go business to business, and you call them cold calling, to sell this art. And it's strictly commission sales. And I remember Lanello saying one time, if you're going to do sales, do commission sales. So I was in Great Falls for 2 days. First day, 1 sale. Second day, 11 o'clock, nothing. And I'm walking up to this office building. It's a place I've gone to before. I was going to go see a customer on the 6th floor. I'm carrying my art in, and I'm going to the elevator. And before I enter the building, I say, Lanello, I really need your sense of humor. I really need your sense of humor. So I got to the elevator, and a gentleman was coming, and we met. And I had talked to this gentleman about 6 months ago, and he didn't buy anything. And he's a fast-talking businessman who comes on the offensive, doesn't give you the opportunity to give the sales presentation. So we both got in the elevator, and he looked at my art, and I was thinking, well, should I say anything to this guy? No, I'm not going to say anything to him. And he said, I just spent my wad on art last week. And I looked at him and I said, with your good looks, you don't need money. I couldn't believe it. And so it didn't end. And he looked at me and he said, really? He said, really, I'd like to put $2,000 in your hand. And I looked at him and I said, you're not that good looking. So Lanello was there when I needed him. Had 4 sales in the next 45 minutes. The next story is I had the honor to be a Summit University sales rep. It was a great opportunity. This was in the late 80s. And I was in Kansas City, and there was a bookstore that hadn't purchased books from us for quite a while. So I thought, well, I'll be able to go do some fact-finding on this. So I walked in the bookstore, and I'm talking with the buyer. He's hemming and hawing. He's a little resistant. The phone rang, and he was called away. So I said, Lanello, help me sell this guy. Just help me to sell this guy. We got to get our books in here. So I turn around, and there's a gentleman looking at some books. And I go up, and I stand next to him. I said, he was a customer. I said, may I help you? He was looking at Zen teachings, and he said, well, I'm looking for this book by a Zen master. I said, don't move. I've got the perfect book for you. It's not on the bookshelf. It's in my car. So I left the store, went to my car, and got Sheila in the Path by El Morya. And I put it in his hand. I said, this is the Zen master of all masters, of Zen masters, El Morya, Sheila in the Path. And I read him a few paragraphs, and he said, well, how much is it? And I told him, he said, where do I pay for it? So he went and bought Sheila in the Path. And as this transaction was happening, the buyer was coming back. And he said, well, what was going on there? I said, one of your customers was looking for a book. And I had it in my car, and I gave it to him, he bought it. He kind of looked sheepish. I said, now, how many books did you want from Summit University? I said, did you want lost teachings? He couldn't. He had no choice. He had to buy. I tell you, dearly, Lanello, he put me in sales. I don't know how I got there, but he's doing it. He's really, and what he also does, I really think he knows that when a heart needs to be opened, and through sales, Lanello is teaching me to love. Then in the 80s, early 80s, Lanello launched a new way to spread the teachings of the Ascended Masters. He had us pack our bags, we boxed our publications, we got our videos and audio cassettes together, and we went off in teams to conquer the state fairs. From 1983 to 1988, I was on one of Lanello's state fair teams. During that time, he taught me how to sell, how to work with team, but most of all, what he taught me was, don't judge outer appearances. It's right in the heart, that's what counts. Well, we would drive up to our state fairgrounds, we'd go inside, check out our booth location, we'd have our cassette player going, the light would come in, the place was being resurrected, we'd play our waltzes, the bhajans, and one of my favorites was I Shook Lanello's Hand. I always wanted to shake Lanello's hand. And I was not in the teachings when he was in embodiment. So I think it was Washington, we were at the State Fair, and we were behind the grandstand. The location was not a prime location. And this one night, no one was there, no customers. The aisle was bare. We had jewelry, crystal, and we had publications. And I was behind the jewelry display, and Tomas Delgado was over here by publications. So we started calling to Lanello. Actually, I started shouting to him. I said, "Lanello, where are you? Lanello, I need you." This went on for a little while. So I looked down the aisle, and here's this man walking towards us. Totally out of place. He has a tweed sport coat, tweed vest, and a little tweed snap hat. So he's walking, and he approaches where I am, and I stopped him, and I said, "Are you Lanello?" And he said, "Yes." So I said, "Let me shake your hand." So he kept walking, and all of a sudden he turned around and looked at me. He said, "I'm not Lanello." Oh. And Tomas said, "Wasn't it fun being Lanello just for a little while?" So that's how I got to shake Lanello's hand. Lanello to me is community. Community is friendship, our love together, our supporting one another, and working together towards a common goal. In Lost Teachings of Jesus, Volume 2, Lanello tells us why we come together and what is expected of us. And this is Lanello's counsel to us. We have these get-togethers so we can discuss the Christian mysteries until every eye shall see him, because the mysteries are unveiled to each one by Christ himself, through the Holy Spirit, the true intercessor in our midst. Yes, I expect this organization to supplant the false doctrines of the church completely. I expect this organization to sweep every lukewarm, half-baked church there is in the whole world out of existence. Ultimately, I mean every word I say.
My name is Lars Johansson, and I've been a student of the teachings of the Ascended Master since 1976. And presently I'm working in the shipping department here at LRY over in Livingston. I had not the privilege to meet Lanello in physical incarnation. However, I would like to share with you 3 experiences which I had with Lanello in this life. My first real contact with Lanello happened when I was present for the first live dictation, which was by Lanello. And this was in 1977, Christmas Eve dictation. This was also the first dictation ever at Camelot. I was a part of the team that had to move all the chairs from our sanctuary in Pasadena over to Camelot. And I was really eager to hear this first live dictation because in those days we didn't have any videos, so I didn't know how dictation was happening. And to be honest with you, I did have some doubts regarding the Ascended Masters and the messengers. And halfway to his wonderful, beautiful dictation, I was sitting somewhere mid-section. I felt this wonderful presence, almost like a garment of light, come upon me. And this presence stayed with me throughout the whole dictation, and even those hours after the dictation, when I was together with some other staff members taking down all the chairs, putting them up on the truck, and loading them and bringing them back to Pasadena and putting them up again in the sanctuary in Pasadena. And when all was done, it was 4 o'clock in the morning. And the next morning, it was Jesus Christ Christmas Day address. It started at 9 o'clock. And I really wondered in what shape I would be when I was going to attend this service. So what happened was that I made a last prayer to Lanello to be taken to his retreat. I fell asleep. And to my amazement, 4 hours later, I woke up. And I had had the most wonderful sleep ever in my whole life. And I actually saw light when I woke up and felt this light in my physical body. And I knew that this was like a present from Lanello to me. And what I really felt when I woke up that day was that I was really at home for the first time in my life. And all my doubts regarding the Ascended Masters was gone that time. And the next experience happened with me a little more than 1 year later. On my birthday, actually. I was back in Sweden. I attended my Mary's quarter of Summit University and was back in Sweden. And we had some problems with some SU students that had attended Summit University in 1977, who when they came back to Sweden had been pulled in by a keeper of the flame who had not attended Summit University, but he had a very strong magnetic personality. And all these Summit University students started to follow him. And he was almost like a self-styled guru who was usurping the office of the messenger and was teaching the students to practice the teachings in a different way. And these SU students, they knew better, but they were somehow so caught up in this magnetism that they thought it was the right way. And I was especially concerned of a friend of mine who was a part of this group because he had become this self-styled guru's right hand. And I saw that if I could only make him see, then everybody else would follow. So there I was all alone on my birthday because I had to separate myself out of these people. And I didn't know what to do, actually, until I realized the only thing I really can do is to do my decrees. And this day, I made intense call to Lanello. It was like my birthday call to Lanello, as he has asked us to give for other people, that he should somehow awake these people, these SG students, so that they might go back on the right path. And I fell asleep, and during this night, I had the most vivid retreat experience I've ever had. I was seeing myself walking behind Mother and Lanello into a room. And in this room, this friend of mine was sitting on a chair. And as soon as we closed the door behind us, Lanello walked up to this friend of mine and started to preach to him in a very stern and loving voice. And I don't remember exactly what he said, but the essence was that he had already been given the teachings, he attended Summit University, he should know better, and he should come back to the right path. And this experience was so vivid to me. And as soon as Lanello was finished, Mother also gave him some teaching. And as everybody was done, we walked out of the room, and I woke up. And this experience was so vivid, so real to me, that I for sure thought that my friend had the same experience. So as soon as I could, I called him up the next morning and told him of my experience. And he told me that, well, I think you must be psychic. And then I realized that I had to leave him alone because he had made his choice. And I had to actually respect his free will and just move on. And a few weeks later, what happened was that some of these other SC students actually turned around and joined this other group smaller group which we had started. It took a little bit longer time for my friend, but finally he also turned around and is now presently living here in Montana. So by the grace of God, this happened. And this really showed me what was so amazing to this was that it was such a quick answer to my call. Within 6 hours, I had this vivid, clear experience of Lanello and Mother talking to this person. And what I also realized, that was the best birthday present I ever could have, because I realized that I, in Lanello, actually had a real friend in heaven. So the call compels the answer, and if you have any problems, you should really call to Lanello, because he will answer every call you give. The last thing I would like to tell you about is my opportunity to attend Summit University. This happened in 1981 when I attended Lanello's quarter of Summit University. And during this quarter, Mother really made Lanello real to me. She came in and gave a lot of teachings on Mark's previous embodiments. And one could really sense the presence of Lanello in the room, even when she was not present there. And I urge everybody throughout the world who have not attended Summit University to come to Summit University this summer, to feel the presence of Lanello, to bask in his presence, and to be transformed by his presence. There are a few things that really touched me during Summit University. One thing was that Mark had an extraordinary love, a deep desire and deep sincere love for each individual. I was especially moved by the story which Mother told us about Mark traveling hundreds of miles just to speak to one single individual. I believe that he was traveling from Colorado Springs to Los Angeles to speak to one soul who was about to leave the teachings. To me, this showed that Mark, he put supreme value on every single individual. He extended his time, his heart, just to travel to this person. And I feel that he was such a great example for us that we should all try to be like him in our own teaching centers, in our own study groups throughout the world and America, to care for one another, to care for new people, and to even care for long-standing keepers of the flame. Perhaps it's time for us to do our people-to-people journey, to contact those souls of light that are already in the teachings. The other thing which I also experienced during Lanello's quarter was that I realized how hard both messengers, both Lanello and Mother, has worked throughout the ages to spread the teachings, the true teachings of the Christ. And I tell you, one and all throughout the world, that if you have the slightest desire and slightest understanding of the value of these teachings, and the slightest desire to assist Lanello and Mother to spread these teachings of the Christ, to assist him in contacting those 10,000 souls of light, you should come to Summit University this summer. And if you don't know how you can make it to Summit University, I will tell you how I made it to Summit University. I didn't know myself how I would make it to Lanello's quarter. So I put in my application early, very early. And I worked as hard as I could myself, and then finally, I didn't know how to do any more. And a great miracle happened to me just 2 weeks before I attended Summit University. I was missing about $800. And exactly that same amount was given to me, so I could go to Summit University. So I urge you, one and all, to put in your applications today and let Lanello work his alchemy. Thank you.
It was not a psychic fair, but it was an event where they had tables all around a large room with different spiritual organizations having their materials on these tables, and also some of the people were lecturing in smaller rooms in the building. And I picked up a poster on the conference, the summer conference at Mount Shasta in 1975, and saw this beautiful picture of Mount Shasta and a picture of Mother. And at that time, I had been through, I guess, what some people call the alphabet soup of spiritual organizations, the RRF, the SFF, the ARE, and all those. And but when I saw this poster, I knew I had to be at this conference. So I went there, and I went in the bookstore before I heard the first lecture and bought about $100 worth of books and tapes before I even heard the first lecture. Felt I was at home right away. And when I went in to listen to Mother speak, I was observing her with the eye of someone who was trained in psychology. And so I was observing her with that in mind, and my strong feeling was, this is the most balanced person I have ever seen. And I felt so much that I had come home, and afterwards Mother shook hands with everyone at the conference. She sat in a chair outside the big tent and shook hands with everyone. And when I came to shake hands with her, I said, I feel like I'm coming home. I suppose you hear that a lot. And she said, yes, but it's always nice to hear. And later I had a couple of experiences of other people who were not in the teachings observing Mother or her picture and confirming that first impression that I had had. One woman, it was at a New Age conference where I had gone to mingle with people and talk about the teachings. She looked at Mother's picture in the Summit Lighthouse brochure and said, why, she has no karma. She's completely clear. And this was before it had been announced that Mother had balanced 100% of her karma. Another time, I took an older woman who had been one of my childhood mentors, the director of a very special camp that I had attended. I took her to a stump lecture that Mother gave in Chicago. And this woman was quite a bit older than I, in the next generation older, and had been on the spiritual path in her own way for many years. And she told me afterwards, she said, you know, I've been blessed to be in the presence of many wonderful spiritual teachers in my life. But she said there was always one thing that they had, and that was they had a human ego. And she said, in Elizabeth, I see no human ego. And so she noticed that right away. My experience with Lanello, I want to share with you, happened at Summit University in spring of '79 during Maitreya's quarter. I was very, very tired one evening. I had been up several nights in a row, much too late, and it was this kind of deep tiredness that I knew that for me, no amount of coffee or supplements or anything else would help. And I had quite a bit of work to do that night. I had to write a paper and do some studying. And I just felt there was no way that I could possibly stay awake to do this. So I made a call to Lanello and for energy, and I received such an infusion of joyous energy that I will never forget it. You know, sometimes you say a prayer, and we all have this experience where we say a prayer and what we pray for comes about, but we're not quite sure whether it was really the prayer or whether it would have happened anyway. But this was one of those times when there was absolutely no doubt that Lanello was giving me this energy. And not only did I have plenty of energy to work late into the evening and get all my work done, but it was such a joyous time. It was such a happy time. I felt so happy and joyous as I was doing my work. And I almost wasn't able to go to sleep when it was time to go to sleep. I had so much energy. So ever since then, I always call to Lanello when I need extra energy, and he always comes through. And the other thing I always call to him for is to find me the perfect car that I need at any given time. And he always does very well with that, too. So I imagine the masters probably chuckle over how we call to certain ones for certain things when any one of them could do everything for us. But anyway, I encourage you to make calls to Lanello too. And I forgot to mention that I serve here on part-time staff in the kitchen, and am very grateful to be here. I live in North Glastonbury. It's a great blessing to be here in this community. Thank you. Thank you.
Good evening, Mother. Good evening. Good evening, everyone. My name is Walter Maunz. I work in the graphic arts department of the church, and I first came in contact with the Ascended Masters activities briefly with the I Am activity in 1955. I became a keeper of the flame in 1963 or 64, and I joined staff in the fall of 1966. We started these testimonials on February 7th, which is the birthday of Thomas More, which is, as you know, was one of the embodiments of our beloved El Morya. And I was thinking at that time that over 20 years ago there was a movie made about Sir Thomas More, and it was called A Man for All Seasons. And I think this phrase, Man for All Seasons, characterizes Lanello very much as well, since he was a guru, the follower of beloved El Morya. Mark, I feel that I've always had a very great privilege of knowing Mark, and I will revere that privilege for the rest of my life. He was one of the most amazing persons I have ever met, and I will always consider him to be my spiritual father, as I consider Mother to be my spiritual mother. Mark was very adept at reading auras, and he could penetrate through the outer shell of a person, read their karma, and see what their souls needed. He was able to do this for all of us, anybody who could meet, in the way of illumination, love, laughter, discipline, firmness, encouragement, and practicality. And he gave it always to us from his magnanimous heart. Mark had great rapport with elemental life and with the nature kingdom. I remember that I had been invited to join staff 1 to 2 years before I actually joined at a conference in Vienna, Virginia. Well, I graduated from college. Then I went out to do some research work for a few months. And finally, Mark and Mother called me up and said, El Morya says you need to get here or you're going to miss your divine plan. I took that very seriously. So I went through the difficult process of saying goodbye to my family and my relatives who tried to talk me out, of course, from going on this new adventure to join the staff of the Sun Lighthouse. And I drove from Buffalo, New York, all the way to Colorado Springs, to our international headquarters there at La Tourelle. About 60 or 70 miles outside of Colorado Springs, I encountered a very heavy snowstorm. The weather had been fine all the way till, and I got there very late at night. When Mark greeted me in the morning, he kind of apologetically said, well, I'm sorry about the bad weather, but, you took so long to come that I just couldn't hold back the weather any longer. As As you know, Mother has told us that Mark, as a teenager, had all 9 gifts of the Holy Spirit, and I truly believe this. He had such attunement with the inner realms of light while having his feet firmly planted on the ground. Every Sunday evening there were services open to the public, and Mark would give a sermon. And some of these were just magnificent, these sermons. They could be very down to earth, or they could be very transcendent. There's a title of one of them that I will remember for the rest of my life. And the title of the sermon was The Microcosm, the Macrocosm, and the Macrocosm. I don't remember much about the sermon, but I do remember that it was very transcendent. It took us in a cosmic tour up into higher realms, higher octaves, out into the cosmos, and back again. It was indeed magnificent. And it must have been a dictation from his I Am Presence and Causal Body. That's the way I feel about it anyway. When I left home, or when I was planning to leave home, my father was very disappointed that I would do such thing as join a church staff, especially a church that was, unknown. He expected me to be like other people, like his family, to have a career, get married, raise a family, and do all the things that all my relatives did. So one summer, he came by on his vacation, and he was his usual self, full of skepticism, hardness of heart, and pride of worldly accomplishment. He had accomplished a lot of things in his lifetime, at least from an outer standpoint. And so he was invited to come to the Sunday evening sermon service, and so I went with him. And Lanello gave an absolutely soul-moving, soul-stirring sermon. And it was really amazing. It was really amazing to see this. I looked sidelong at my father and saw tears streaming down his cheeks. And this is a beautiful example, if only for a little while, how Lanello could penetrate to the soul of a person and give them what they needed. We call Lanello our ever-present guru. And indeed, as Mark, he was always there when you needed him. I remember at La Tourelle when Mother gave me an assignment to mount a light fixture in an upstairs room. So I went upstairs with my tools and my tape measure, and I very, very carefully measured this. This light fixture was going to go right on the wall, and I took my tape measure and I measured here and I measured there and I measured there and I measured there, and said, this is going to exactly be right there. And then I marked the holes where I was going to drill the holes in the wall to mount the light fixture. And I probably spent a half an hour doing these measurements and getting this thing all set up. So I drilled a hole in there, in the wall. I said, oh no. I had drilled a hole right to one of the air lines all the air lines come from the central compressor down in the basement, and they go to all the thermostats in every room in the house. And I said, I couldn't have done it more perfectly, but I did. Well, only 10 or 15 seconds passed by, and in walks Mark. I told him what I had done. Without hesitation, he said, Master Moria wants you to do this. You get some epoxy steel, then get some styrofoam and powder it. You mix the powdered styrofoam with the epoxy steel, and you put it in the hole and plug up the pipe. I did it, and of course it worked. I was very impressed. That was one of my encounters with Al Moria and Mark. Mark had, he had a Buddha consciousness and a Christ consciousness, and he also had the ability to use universal or cosmic energies, which are sometimes called Fohat. Early in my staff career, I think it was in the fall of '67, I'm not absolutely certain about that, I went with several of the staff members with the messengers and their children in our first motorhome or bus called the Cortez. And we were traveling to two conferences, one in San Francisco and the other in Los Angeles. While we were going to the Central Valley of California on the freeway and approaching San Francisco, and it was very smoggy, and this is the first time I had ever seen smog. It was very yellowish and looked really bad. So we were driving along, and everybody was just driving, minding their own business, and everything was very quiet. Without any warning, Mark gave out a very shrill, piercing sound. And miracle of miracles, the smog just rolled back. In a matter of seconds, it was gone. Nobody said anything, but I certainly remember that to this day. I was amazed that nobody said anything. But I just took that in my heart and remembered it. I would like to relate what is to me a very great personal miracle in my life. It was in the early 60s, and I was in college having a very difficult time. I didn't know why I was in college, and I didn't know what I wanted to do with my life. I didn't have the faintest idea what I wanted to do with my life. And I was very discouraged, very depressed, full of anxiety. I just didn't know what to do. About a year earlier, my mother to a mutual friend of ours, had come in to the teachings of the Summit Lighthouse, and she had been quietly giving her decrees. So one day, I had a great feeling of despair. I saw her decree book, and I said, well, I know it. It can't hurt me to try it. So I took the decree book, and I sat down in the living room, and I can see this like it was yesterday, this image. I mean, it's so photographic. And no sooner had I started decreeing than waves, flood tide of light, energy, of spiritual energy descended. And what's just as amazing is that I did this day after day whenever I could, week after week, month after month, and it was just a cascade of light energy. It was absolutely amazing. Well, needless to say, this turned around my life very fast. I started getting good grades. I graduated from college, and after a brief, as you've already heard me recount, after a brief work experience, I came and joined the staff of the Summit Lighthouse. In closing, I would like to say, thank you, beloved Lanello, for being Mark, for being the chalice as the messenger, and for working with our beloved El Moria to found the Summit Lighthouse and all that has come after that. A place where I and all of us can fulfill our divine plans, and for bringing forth so many wonderful decrees and dictations in abundance. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. It was really wonderful to hear from you. Thank you very much. Let's claim the mantle. I claim the mantle of the Ascended Master Lanello. I claim the mantle of the Ascended Master Lanello. I claim the mantle of the Ascended Master Lanello. Thank you. Have a great week, and get to morning decrees. With Lanello.